So that's the chapter. Let's recap the things we have been learning. What did we learn so far? So carbon-friendly land management is a must. We are going to hurt ourselves in terms of food and water security, air and water quality, and health if we don't do this, and of course exacerbate climate change. Field testbed solutions are needed, which means we talked about many options and amendments and management techniques, but they have to be implemented, tested, data has to be gathered, advantages have to be quantified, etc. So test bed solutions are where it's like a natural lab where we go and actually try these soil management, agricultural management, livestock waste management, etc., fertilizer applications, and quantify the results. A systems perspective is critical, like managing livestock, food production, fertilizer, irrigation, everything together, obviously, because a kind of a life cycle approach is needed. If we focus on just one thing like maximizing crop yields, we will end up in a very different place than if we consider all the co-benefits and harms and benefits. In addition to research, training and outreach are important components of successful strategies for enhancing carbon sinks in soils. Okay, bullet by bullet, greenhouse gas emissions reduction is critical for slowing climate change, but emissions reductions alone are no longer sufficient to solve the problem. We must remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere to bend the curve. So you can think of managing land carbon through agriculture and forest as a part of the carbon capture and sequestration, right? Ecosystems are complex and management approaches must embrace that complexity to be successful. You cannot simplify things just to sell an idea. Trade-offs, for example, between carbon sequestration and enhanced greenhouse gas emissions need to be identified, quantified, and carefully weighed for effective climate change mitigation outcomes. That's where field studies come into effect, monitoring forests, monitoring agricultural lands, monitoring water bodies, soils, etc. For example, in India, there is hardly a good system for measuring soil properties, soil carbon, soil nutrients, soil moisture, etc. Plants need CO2 from the atmosphere to survive and grow, obviously. They convert CO2 to plant tissues via photosynthesis. The annual pattern in the drawdown of CO2 by plants is evident at a global scale in the concentration of atmospheric CO2. The sawtooth pattern we saw is clearly a functioning of the breathing atmosphere, breathing planet. Microorganisms in the soils break down plant litter into soil organic matter. Microbes also respire CO2, returning some of the carbon originally captured by plants to the atmosphere. So that's part of the carbon cycle that we talked about. Annual pattern in respiration of soil microorganisms is detectable at a global scale in the concentration of atmospheric CO2. So locally it may not be very easy to measure, but globally you can easily see it as part of the increase in the winter and fall-winter months. Plants and soils are reservoirs of carbon, clearly. Soils are the largest reservoir of carbon on the land surface. Right, ocean has a lot, but on land, soils are the major players, not the standing trees. Plants are a smaller reservoir of carbon, but they are conduits for moving carbon from the atmosphere to the soil. Okay, if we manage soil well and let it hold the soil organic carbon, then it's obviously going to bend the curve. Soils are the basis for life on Earth, clearly. Food security, water security, health. They are a complex mixture of minerals and organic matter. They house and feed microorganisms and support plants. They are a source and a sink of greenhouse gases, so we have to manage the sources better. All ecosystems produce some greenhouse gases, as this is an indicator of life. All life produces waste, and greenhouse gases are waste produced by life. The problem is we jacked up this emission by burning fossil fuels, which is much more than any other species would emit just for living. Land management can increase greenhouse gas emissions. Agriculture accounts for approximately 25% of the global greenhouse gas emissions. Soil organic matter contains carbon that was originally captured by plants. Soil organic carbon pools vary across locations because they are affected by climate, by plants, vegetation types, by the animals that depend on them, naturally or in industrial farming, livestock management, microbial species, and by the underlying geology, which determines the mineral content. And also the fraction of soil, clay, sand, etc. Soils can accumulate organic carbon when the rate of inputs exceeds the rate of losses. This is called soil carbon sequestration, obviously, and that's what we are trying to maximize. Few more points. Photosynthesis can be thought of as a technology that has been perfected and deployed for over 2 billion years. Plants evolved, the vascular plants only evolved about 400 million years ago, but photosynthetic algae potentially evolved much before that. Chemosynthesis was the way before that. The rate of atmospheric carbon uptake by plants via photosynthesis dwarfed all other forms of carbon capture. Okay. In fact, now as part of the solution to carbon capture and sequestration, many artificial plants are being developed, and artificial photosynthesis is being developed as part of the fuel cell technology as well. Right? Plants are basically doing taking CO2 and H2O and producing carbohydrates, food. Plants can accumulate and store carbon, obviously. Trees and forests store more carbon than other plant life. Forest carbon is vulnerable, on the other hand, to fire and logging, as well as pest outbreaks. Pest outbreaks are found to increase with the warming and extreme events. Tropical plus warming is expanding towards the poles, so some of the pests are moving to higher latitudes as well. So if you reduce the number of frost days at high latitudes, you are going to increase the pest infestation. Just that simple. Tropical deforestation accounts for 10% of the annual greenhouse gas emissions. We saw that if tropical deforestation was a country, it would be third in line after China and the US in terms of emissions per year. Emissions reduction from working lands is critical for climate change mitigation. This is very obvious. There are several possible ways to lower emissions. Many of these approaches have valuable co-benefits for landowners and managers. Fertilizer and livestock waste management are examples of promising avenues for emission reduction. Soil carbon sequestration holds great potential as a carbon sink. Large areas of the land surface have become depleted in soil organic carbon, as we saw the map. Basically occurring through management over the last 12,000 years since we became agricultural pastoralist species. We have been doing that. Many land use practices have already been shown to increase soil carbon storage, so no tillage and so on and so forth. Finally, soil carbon sinks can be divided into three categories: those that slow emissions and allow carbon to accumulate, those that increase the rate of carbon capture by the plant, and those that use amendments to simulate plant growth, changing soil properties, increasing pore space and water penetration, water holding capacity, etc., can stimulate plant growth, increase carbon storage, and reduce emissions in other sectors. How amazing is that, right? So this is kind of the chapter. I hope you got a good sense of how food security, water security, health, and even energy production can be like bioenergy, and bioenergy with carbon capture and sequestration can all be enhanced with the approaches in this chapter. So this is a big part of bending the curve. This is why it's included, and obviously needs to be considered very seriously and carefully.